Hey Rich, how are you?
I'm really good, Shabri. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I can't quite believe how long it's been since I've seen you and spoken to you. But your book has a very proud place on my desk. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
reminded of your name every day. So really good to have you here. Thank you for joining. Rich, for those people who don't know you, and I'm sure that's not many, but I'd love to just get a brief introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Rich. I'm the VP of Sales for the EMEA region of Allego. Allego are one of the leaders in the revenue enablement software space. So we help companies do everything from onboard and train reps, roll out new messaging, coach their sellers, and help sellers essentially get access to the content and the stories and the talk tracks that they need to be successful every single day. I yeah, I've been in sales for about 16 years now. One of these folks, like no doubt many people listen to this who didn't ever intend to get into sales, fell into the profession, started life as an SDR, even though I tell people that the job title SDR, sales development rep, didn't really exist back then. But I was essentially doing that role. And yeah, sort of predominantly my career has been in tech sales, and um, I've got like very uh, a lot of experience of really the way how I build businesses is through outbound and cold prospecting. I've never been one of these people who's benefited from working with a company with a huge brand that is fueled by inbound leads. So that is kind of one of the reasons why I co-authored a book in the year of the pandemic, which is all about helping people um, doing outbound prospecting. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but yeah, that's kind of I guess the background of myself and my career so far. So.
Amazing. I like you started as an SDR as well, but it wasn't called an SDR back then. I mean, they had all kinds of different names. I was called an inside sales rep, but that's something different
Yeah.
now. What were you called out of interest?
I was a business development executive,
Okay.
which is still, three words, right? So it's just been exchanged for sales development representative now. But yeah,
Okay, good. Well, look, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about how that's evolved, but I wanted to start by touching on something you just mentioned that you co-authored a book in the pandemic. You're big on outbound. Um, what was the story of writing the book, and I guess what was your driver to write the book?
yeah, great question, Shabri. I, I think I was one of those people in sales who, when I started life as a business development executive, um, the world was a very different place as far as access to information and content and learning. I mean, this is before YouTube was really a thing. LinkedIn was nothing more than a kind of a personal CV site for people. And uh, if you wanted to seek out how to make a cold call, it was actually very hard to do. You probably had to, hire someone that you knew that was an expert in that, and there's the type of um, skills and know-how of how to do something like how to make a great cold call. It's just wasn't very accessible for people like myself, and I was largely kind of I self-taught myself, and for the first few years of my career, I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. Quite honestly, I was just one of these people who pick the phone up and kind of like muddle my way through calls, and I had a level of success off the back of it. Um, and the world's obviously a very different place now, and access to learning and content and is much more readily available. That being said, um, in the when the pandemic hit, what we myself and two of my colleagues were very cognizant of at that time is that the world of sales suddenly got quite scary, especially for people who are quite new to the role. Maybe they some people might have just started their new job that month as say like an SDR, and suddenly they're being told, no, you can't come to the office. You got to work from home in your bedrooms, and you've still got to be successful without having people around you to help you out. And we figured that what we do is put on these kind of boot camps online to basically uh, just share all the knowledge that we have about doing outbound to people who wanted to listen. We did it as something that we just wanted to help people, quite honestly. And we were pretty staggered by the number of people who actually came and showed up to that first boot camp we did. I think it was something like over 1,000 people showed up. It was pretty amazing, and so much so that we continued these week after week, and I think we did about 12 of these overall. And it was literally us showing up, talking about all the stuff that we'd learned about how to make cold calls, how to handle objections, how to write great emails, how to build a brand socially, all this kind of the toolkit that the modern day SDR or salesperson needs. And then it was Mark's idea, one of my co-authors, who basically said, tell you what, why don't we write a book? We've got nothing better else to do on a weekend when we're locked inside. And it seemed like a bit of a crazy idea at the time, but for those who actually have an interest in writing a book, it's never been easier to get a book published through Amazon. So I'd highly encourage people to take the step, because you might have a bit of imposter syndrome to do that. We did it. It took more time than I was expecting to write it. But it's been one of the best things I've ever done, Shabri. We've been blown away by how many copies we've sold, quite frankly, of Problem Prospecting. I actually looked, it's very rare a day has gone by since we released the book in December 2020 where at least one copy hasn't been bought somewhere in the world. Is pretty amazing. And the whole concept of Problem Prospecting in this book is basically designed to be a little bit of a handbook for the modern day prospector on using different channels and basically how to do these things, the stuff that I was never lucky enough to be taught when I started the role. And your very kind of practical guide for people who are maybe first time to the world of outbound, or maybe have been doing the job for a while and are in a bit of a slump and looking for new ways or way to do things. So that's the whole story. A little bit of a long-winded story, but that's kind of how it all came about.
I love it, and I'm not surprised at all at the success of the book. But I completely see that. I think when a lot of people look for information on how to techniques, all that sort of stuff. I
Yeah.
think, like you said, I think there's the challenge of there's not really much out there, but then I think there's the other challenge of we're inundated with stuff that is like 90% not very good.
Mm.
Okay. And I think that's where your experience really came in, where you're like, this actually works and it's backed up by a story. And that's and that's kind of part of the challenge with sales training, isn't it, that you kind of have people who have never really sold before or sold 30 years ago, advising you and coaching you on what to do. So I think it's really good that you've taken your hands-on experience. So you said you published the book in December 2020. We're almost 3 years on now, and I think sales has changed so much in the last
Mm.
3 years, probably more so than it ever has done in that kind of period before. Um, what do you think has really changed the most since publishing the book that you have in there, and that you're
Yeah.
big part of it for you?
It's a great question because I think the world has changed. I don't think the approaches that we've written in the book are. I don't think I would change those approaches, so to speak. But what I would say is that the whole world of outbound has definitely got harder.
Mm,
Um, and I think if I look at I just find it fascinating how the world of business and the way that people buy is very much just becoming very similar to how we buy as consumers, and how we operate as consumers in our personal lives. And I think if I look at as humans, we probably are um less willing to speak on the phone these days. In our personal lives, we want everything to be you know ideally on a message or something like digestible. We If we want to make buying decisions in our personal lives, if it means avoiding speaking to a salesperson, we'll probably take that path of least resistance, because hey, if we can click two buttons on an Amazon app to have something delivered next day without having to walk into a shop or call somebody up and make an order of the phone, we will we will go to the Amazon app all day every day. And because of this, because of the way that we operate in our personal lives, that's inherently just how bleeding into our business lives. And I think because of that, the job of people doing outbound today is definitely getting harder. I think it's becoming less of a game of, hey, just make 50 dials or send this many emails and you'll do well. I think you can still get by doing the activity, but I think the world it's getting especially with the rise of like AI, and whilst I don't think AI is there to like take the jobs of SDRs just yet, there's enough there to be seen to think, whew, it's not quite there right now, but in 2 years it wouldn't surprise me if it's going to be there. And so that means the bar's got a lot higher, and we have to think about being a lot more strategic with how we engage with prospects, um, do things that AI can't do, and keep ahead of the step ahead of the game there, and even start to engage with prospects more about in a way that how they prefer to be sold, how they buy in their personal lives. So we can maybe take a dive into some of those things I've just said there, but I think in general, the tactics of how to do outbound, I think, haven't really changed so much since we've wrote the book. But what has changed is I think outbound in general has got harder.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. And we've had quite a few guests on this podcast who have talked about that. And one of the indicators of that is that SDRs aren't hitting target.
Mm.
I think there is a fear of the phone. I used to love cold calling, but maybe I was in the minority there. But I think there is this fear of the phone. Um, do you see that? And if so, what do you think is the cause of that fear?
Yeah, and and I speak as someone who, in the early part of my career, I was scared of picking up the phone, quite frankly. But I think, as I said, especially with more of a millennial audience coming in and working in tech as their first, typically as their first job as they're starting in the role of an SDR. Not always, but that's typically what happens. And these are people who aren't used to speaking on the phone in their personal lives. They are used to engaging in other means, and so I think that's part of it, right? So you just got people who, I brought up in a world where the house phone would ring, and I was forced to pick it up and talk to people who wanted to speak with my parents, and have to, take messages and things, and that kind of stuff seems so basic right now. But actually, that's just a world that a lot of people don't live. Like, a lot of people don't have house phones these days. They don't need them. Um, but I think the other side of it is just the general. One of the main reasons that people have core reluctance is because it does go against all the kind of the rules and instructions that our parents placed on us when we were growing up. Don't talk to strangers, don't interrupt people. Our vision of cold callers was at home, like your dad hanging up on the person selling double glazing on the phone, and they were just seen as nuisances. And so
Yeah.
you inherently feel like that's going to be you. Um, so I think there's that. But I think above and beyond that, Shabri, I just think people aren't trained on how to make cold calls. And it's like anything, if you don't have the know-how, then you're unlikely to have the confidence, right? It's like anything in life. If
Mhm.
the more confidence, the more knowledgeable you are at something, the more confident you are in that topic. Um and so if companies can't train and equip their sellers on how to be effective using these methods, then they're never going to get the confidence, because they'll always be like I was, 16 years ago. I didn't was never shown how to do it, and so I was never confident to pick up the phone because I didn't really know what I was doing. And I think that is something that a lot of companies just it's too easy to put the blame on. Oh, they're millennials. They're not used to speaking on the phone. Actually, that is part of it, but other part is that companies aren't training their people on how to do these things.
Yeah, gosh, I'd always put the focus on the latter of, companies aren't enabling and empowering their teams to do that. But I'd never thought about it in the former that you just mentioned of, we grew up picking up the house phone, right? I grew up having to call for a taxi. There was no Uber, calling for a takeaway. There was no Deliveroo, and now everyone can do everything at the touch of a button. So it's interesting to see both of those factors come into play. I think there is this over reliance on email that we've talked about,
Mm,
and I remember probably during COVID, actually, there was a lot of personalization at scale and automation and all of these kind of things that these tools were helping us to do. What are you seeing in terms of moving away from, like, we talk about personalization and we talk about video and voice notes and cutting through the noise. I guess
yeah.
what do you think is important there, and what tips would you have um, for any SDRs that are listening to this that they can action today?
Well, it's really interesting, right? Because mm, take personalization, right, is a topic that has been talked about now, not for years, quite frankly. Like personalization, yeah, it's one of those things that I still see so little of it as a buyer on the receiving end of this. And I scratch my head at it because it's not like this is a new thing. It's for me, it feels like personalization from prospecting should just be a given now. But actually, in 2023, I can count on one hand the amount of um, prospecting emails, for example, I've received that I would send to me that I would genuinely say, "Wow, this feels like this person has gone to a level of effort to personalize this email." Now, if I'm saying that, and I'm someone who, if someone spent 2 minutes on my LinkedIn profile page to see the kind of stuff I talk about, um, then there's got to be a whole lot of an awful lot of people out there who get such little personalization from the approaches that people make. So my point is that we talk about this as if like it should just be a given, but actually I think in reality so little of it actually happens
Mm.
still to this day. And it's funny because I wrote a post on LinkedIn yesterday of like, here's 5 or 6 opening lines of emails or LinkedIn messages that I will never ever
I
open.
saw that.
And it was like, can we jump on a call? Or I, um, I can't remember what they were, but it was like it was the various lines of messages. Um, and I'm like, this is still happening every day in my inbox. This is still happening, and um, the good news is that for the people out there who want to be different, then just be different to 99% of other people sending this stuff every single day. You will break through the noise. Um, and I think that's just something for people listening to this to really, heed those words, is that the significant majority of stuff landing in your prospects inbox still to this day is nowhere near personalized, is probably not even relevant. So there is still hope when if you go into your day every morning at 9 o'clock or whatever time you start work, thinking that, man, I am going to be the one person that actually stands out in my prospects inbox today, and it's not going to take a lot of effort. Like you, it's something to give you a bit of confidence.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I do often wonder: is it an attitude thing? Is it companies putting focus on the wrong metrics? Is it a training thing? What do you think it's down to?
I'd love to know the answer because and maybe I live in a bit of a vacuum because I see the people engaging with my posts and young people in the world of sales who clearly look like they're embracing it, learning from it, um, and maybe I live in a vacuum of the people who approach me just aren't those people. Um, I think if I had to like make a prediction of what I think it is, I think it's still this world that, hey, automation and blasting stuff out is the shortcut to results, and maybe that comes down from pressure that they're facing internally. Um, Maybe they've tried to do a bit of personalization, didn't really work for them. They gave it a try, and so they've just gone back to, oh well, let's just load people into a sequence, hit the go button, and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Um, I can't sit here and say confidently what I see as the problem. I see what my team do, and I know that my team, do the right things, and we get decent results from it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Shabri, on what you why you think this is still happening in 2023.
I think it's a blend of things. Um, I think there is sometimes a naivety from leadership on how difficult prospecting actually is, and
Yeah.
so I don't see a lot of companies giving their teams the right tools to be successful. So I'll give you an example. I know a lot of companies who bought their teams outreach or sales loft and said, "Here, you've got one of the best tools to go and prospect." Outreach and sales loft is a tool, but you need to have the skills behind it. So you need to have the skills of what does an effective video look like, how
Yeah.
to write an effective email, what is a good subject line, what is a good call to action, to do a call. What is the opener, what are the questions I should be asking. There's a ton of training and
Mm,
skill building that needs to go into that. You can't just fix a problem with a tool. So I think that's one thing. I think there's the naivety. And then I think the other thing is, I think that we're still measuring, and you talked a little bit about it at the start, I think we're still measuring activity as this like North Star metric of number of calls, number of emails, and things like that. And I think I saw a post yesterday from Rory at Trumpet talking about, how many reps um, are hitting target, and actually, some of the scary things about, it was, 25% increase in stakeholders. We've got
mm,
15% drop in win rates, and you actually look at all of those and you're like, okay, we need to be changing the way we think about metrics. Revenue is a lagging indicator, but what are
mm,
the right leading indicators to have in place? And I think things like, how many stakeholders have you multi-threaded? How many people are you speaking to in the account? I think there's a bigger shift that needs to happen, in terms of eh, out activity and output. But I think, people like you are making the right moves in terms of helping people who aren't getting coaching and training for their companies. But I'm not sure it's enough.
I think what you said there is, it's really, really key, about companies still looking at the wrong metrics. And the truth of that is because it's so easy to look at those metrics. As a sales leader, it takes you 10 seconds to load up an activity dashboard and to see how many calls someone's made, how many emails. And that it's like laziness in leadership by just making decisions based on that
Mm.
is no worse than is no worse than the people doing just mass blasts and emails, sending out 60 emails and hoping for the best.
Yeah,
um and I think companies need to really rethink about, as you say, what should those metrics be, what should the right behaviors be getting demonstrated every single day.
yeah,
And that's not me saying that activity isn't important. Like, it's activity is still key. But SDRs in today's complex buying world, and you said this brilliantly, is like they're dealing with new challenges where they're having to speak with multiple stakeholders in the business. People are maybe more reluctant to meet, and so the timing has to be right, and so they have to figure out ways of how can I nurture and stay top of mind with prospects, so when the timing's right, I'm there. And they are more and more operating like a marketing function of, like, they are, they are there to help keep prospects warm and um, get the message and the brand out to different people in a business, even if they're not ready to meet with you.
yeah,
And so maybe we need to reward SDRs more in, like, how many active, meaningful conversations they've got, or if they get a referral, something like that.
mhm,
Because otherwise, I think it's going to be far too easy for sales leadership to continue just taking the easy shortcut of, well, I'm just going to look at my dashboard, my activity
yeah,
dashboard, and tell you if you're doing a good job or not.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's about measuring those right things, and then I think if things aren't working as a leader, what are you doing to raise the bar, right? So is it
Mm,
investing in training and development? Is it getting different tools? Is it more coaching and all of those different things? But yeah, it sounds like you and I are on the same page about a lot of the root causes there. I wanted to shift slightly to what you think makes up a good SDR now. You have a lot of exposure to them. You run a lot of boot camps. Um, there's so much more that's involved
yeah.
when you and I started the role. And I know brand building and things like that are really, really key here. But what is it you think really makes up a top SDR?
Yeah, and there's things that I think will never go away by, having that um determination and that mindset to do a really tough job, and what many can see as quite a repetitive job, and being able to start every day by going at it again. And for some people, they don't have that. And so I think that'll never ever go away, the necessity for that. But I do think I do think the new SDR, how they can be successful is by becoming a lot more strategic. It isn't so much about, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm going to make this many calls, and I'm going to send out this many emails, and it's and feel like I've done a good job at the end of it. I think it's being able to um smartly curate different types of prospects, and splitting those out by personas, and being able to craft messaging for each one of those personas, especially if you're selling in multi-product business into an organization. Being able to keep tabs on what's going on in the industry, being able to have your finger on the pulse of job changes, of um events happening with target accounts in the media, and being able to respond to that. Um, Being able to look beyond just what you see on LinkedIn, but go deep into companies' websites and press releases, and learn about the strategy of the business, like what's going on from the top down. Um, Being able to build that audience on social, and that's not for everybody. It's if your audience doesn't exist on LinkedIn, then you might not want to invest so much time in it. But there are benefits to building a brand on LinkedIn outside of just booking meetings with people. Your brand does stay with you for your career from a personal perspective. But I'm even seeing some of the really smart SDRs, like, in fact, some of the people that work on my team, I'm seeing that they're getting involved in communities. They're attending industry webinars. They're seeing who's attending those things, what kind of questions they're asking. They're then going to those individuals afterwards and saying, "Hey, I noticed you were on this webinar and you were asking these questions, and that's really interesting that you're asking those questions." Um, and it's being able to find the places that your prospects are hanging out in, and being part of that. Um, and I just think part of it as well is, and in just a hunger and a desire to constantly refine what you're doing, like refining messaging, call scripts, being able to um you know really hound people who are doing really well in the business, and understand what are they doing that's leading to success. um Setting up conversations with people in the business, even those that don't work in the sales development team,
Yeah.
could be people in marketing or in product, to unlock what's in their head. It's this is kind of the things that I'm seeing, that the SDRs, again, this is about how are you staying ahead of the curve. I think these are things that I'm seeing people do that is helping it. That it's more than just this game of, hey, here's my list of prospects today. Got 50 people on this list. I'm going to call them. I'm going to email them, and that'll be the end of my day.
Yeah, oh my God, so much that you said there that I think is so spot on. And I think a lot of that is innate. right? I don't think, you're telling your team to go and do that. I think they're doing it because of that passion for development and because of that hunger to learn.
Right.
And I think that's not something you can teach in them. So what do you look for when you hire then? How are you kind of assessing that?
Yeah. So for a lot of people coming into that role, again, it's for a lot of them they've never done the role before. They may have done the role at a previous company for a short space of time. Um, so it's for a lot of people they don't have the track record of doing those things before. So, but what I think, like when I see the people do it, they as you said, they're doing it off their own back. They're kind of street. They've got that kind of they're streetwise, and it comes down to intelligence and creativity. And it's like I just learned in sales is the people who are really really smart and really really intelligent and switched on just have that ability to try new things and experiment um and I just think that's such a key trait that I look for is people who hey they just seem like a super switched on person that they don't need their kind of hand holding. They don't need to be told, "Hey, do these things." They just have a knack of in their head thinking, "Hey, I'm gonna. I've just seen a webinar being advertised by this company. I think people I sell to might well be going to that webinar. I'm gonna sign up for that, and I'm gonna see who's on there, what people are talking about. Like that. Just I'm not telling if I'm not telling people to do that. They're just in their head they're making the connection of like, this is a way for me to generate conversations. Um, and then the other side of it is if is that coachability
Yeah.
is that like okay, the stuff that I can teach this person, like will they absorb it and will they put it into practice? And that's the other thing that I think is really high up the list is, hey, I can teach you how to do some of these core skills, um, but there's me teaching you it and you actually implementing it. And if that's key, you have to have the coachability to actually take what I teach you and to actually put it into practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's not something you can coach. I think that's something that's innate as well.
Yeah,
Good to get your thoughts on that. And then lastly, Richard, I guess we talked a lot about the rep side of it, flipping to the buyer side of things, and the current state of sales. We've obviously seen a lot evolve there. We've seen the introduction and growth of digital sales rooms. We've seen a lot evolve around um, the buyer's journey.
yeah.
What are you seeing, and what do you think is needed, and what do you anticipate will continue to grow? I guess.
I think this loops back to what I was saying earlier on, Shabri, of like, you know, how people are buying in their personal lives is
Mm.
it's just bleeding into how people are looking to buy in their business lives. And I think there was some kind of statistic that um, Gartner shared recently, which was something like nearly 50% of buyers um, would rather not interact with a salesperson at all in the world of B2B sales. It's
Wow.
depressing statistic for people like myself in the industry. But it's the reality, right? Is like and I can see for myself, like I'd be lying if you said, "Hey Rich, you can either go on Amazon and do your own research and buy this thing in 3 clicks, or you have to, you know, walk into town, into a store, speak with a salesperson, you know, like it's just an easy decision for me. And like, so I can see how this is transferring into how people want to buy in the world of B2B sales and even complex B2B sales. So but it's that thing of like, okay, you can either battle against that or you can just accept it. That's the way humans are changing and adapt to meet the buyer where they are.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, the rise of digital sales rooms is a great example, a great tool that sellers can use to meet the buyer where they are, to actually enhance how buyers perceive them as salespeople, because they can actually make the buying journey a lot more convenient for the buyer, not always have to be, you know, on a call with a salesperson to ask questions.
Yeah.
Um, and so, there's these digital sales rooms are a great way of a salesperson to create a very personalized mini sort of website for their buyers where they can add in videos, personalized videos, they can add in content, they can add in, um, you know, proposals, documentation, stuff that the buyer typically wants to consume in the buying process. The buyer can just come in and out of that sales room at their own pace. They can get answers in there. They can even do like instant messaging with the salesperson at their own convenience. And I just think that that's where the market is going. The things like digital sales rooms will become more prevalent in the next sort of 2 to 3 years. Um, and Yeah, I think we just have to accept that that's buyers' preferences are changing, and as a result of that, we have to make sure that we're doing our best to meet them where they are, and even if that means that you don't get to speak with them as much as you want as a seller, because actually you've got to understand what they want as a buyer.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think it's that agility that you have to have as a rep, though. I was working with a company, I remember, and the guy said to me, "I just like I don't want to be on Zoom. I like just always call my mobile." And we were kind of in that whole thing of you should be on video, you should be using it. It can actually, if he doesn't want to speak on Zoom, I will call his mobile. And I think it's actually having that agility and that to an extent that emotional intelligence to read the other person and
Yeah.
understand what they want as well. There's so much here, Richard. I could talk to you for hours, but I wanted to end on one question. You're obviously on the receiving end of so much outreach. You've got a good idea of what stands out, what doesn't. What's been the best piece of outreach that you've ever received?
Um. So I'm not sure I could sit here and think the best I've ever received. However, what I can definitely do is talk about a recent story of where I was on the receiving end of some good outreach, because it does not very often. So when it happens, it really stands out. And yeah, I actually received a cold call. It's probably about a month ago now. Um, and like maybe the person calling me had read the book and that's why it resonates so much. I don't know. But what the person did so well is, first of all, try to call me, right? Doesn't happen very often. Um, and secondly, they had clearly they clearly demonstrated an understanding of what types of problems someone like me in my role is likely facing right now. And what I mean by that is, um, that messaging and the problems that person spoke about might not have been so relevant 12 to 18 months ago when the economy was in a better place and selling was easier. So they just demonstrate a really good understanding of understanding what is top of mind for my buyers, my prospects right now in today's economy, in today's, in today's world.
Mm.
Um and they booked a meeting with me, and I think that there's a lesson there, is that um being good at cold calling isn't just about, how you open the call and all the rest of it. It is about understanding your buyers. And I think every seller, once a month, once every 2 months, at the very least once a quarter, should be sitting down, you know ideally as a team, but if not, by yourself, if you don't have the benefit of a team, and starting to understand, what problems do my prospects care about today, in today's world, and how can I adapt my messaging to resonate with those problems. Because the worst thing you can be doing is saying the same thing you were saying 12 months ago. So it's a valuable exercise, and that was definitely what the SDR, who was called Callum, I'll give him a shout. It was called Callum, was his name, did when he called me very recently.
Amazing. It's so nice to hear that because it wasn't an overly complicated thing that he did, but
Yeah.
he still managed to stand out. So I think that's a lesson to everyone, at least to use the phone. But Richard, thank you so much. It's been such an insightful conversation. And if people want to reach out to you or connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, yeah. Just look me up on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to connect with anybody who said they listen to this podcast. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. There's your personalization. But thank you, Richard. Great to have you, and great to see you again.